Lockdown by Peter May, published by Quercus. This was a book that was penned in 2005, but at that point Peter May couldn't find a publisher to publish this particular work because it is set in a dystopian period when H5N1, the bird flu, has attacked the world and has now settled in London. And his rendition of a dystopian London was deemed at that point too incredulous. But if you do decide to read this book, and I guess there are quite a few people who might decide not to read it because it's just too close at the moment. We did do a poll on Instagram and found that 60% of people would choose to read it, 40% would choose not to read it. So going back to 2005, his research at that point was meticulous, and what is going on in the book that he wrote in 2005 is replicated in what is happening across the world and in England, in London, in 2020. This book is set in London when a pandemic is raging. The book opens on Lambeth Green, where they are busy building a makeshift hospital. There is already a huge one at the Dome, as it was called then, which is the O2 Arena. Battersea Power Station has been remodelled, where they're actually having to burn the bodies of all the people who are dying. And in the middle of Lambeth Green, there is a bag full of bones, and these bones are the bones of a child of around 10 years old, of Asian origin, and she comes to be nicknamed as Lynn. Her real name is Choi. D.I. Jack McNeil is in charge of investigations, and his right-hand woman is Amy Wu, and she will be looking into the forensics of the death of this child. She discovers fairly early on that this child had a cleft palate and that the flesh was stripped, sliced from the bones. Her ending was really awful, but there is more to be discovered. This is a well put together thriller that's quite easy to read, that certainly takes the reader to London. Yes, it is a bit more dystopian than perhaps we would anticipate. He obviously enjoys taking the reader around various bits of London, adding little bits of information. D.I. McNeil actually lives in Forest Hill. I was born and brought up there, so that felt very familiar. Over on the Isle of Dogs, which incidentally is where Henry VIII used to keep his dogs, hence the name. Apparently, there is an enclave of people who don't have the H5N1 virus and are determined to keep anyone out who might infect them. What was it like reading a book called Lockdown that at the heart had a pandemic, a worldwide pandemic that focused in on London, whilst we are in lockdown in England in 2020? It was curious because a lot of what the people were going through in the book is what we are going through now. You know, they weren't allowed to shake hands, they couldn't be near each other for fear of spreading the virus to their nearest and dearest. On the other hand, did it feel a bit far-fetched? Well, you know, in some capital cities, the army are out on the streets. They're out in London in the book. So it felt very much a mirror of what is going on now, perhaps a little bit more horrific, but I didn't mind reading it. You didn't make me feel more worried about what's happening now. So it seemed very pertinent to be reading this now. So do you think you might pick up a copy of Peter May's Lockdown, a thriller about a pandemic when a pandemic is actually raging around the world in 2020? I can imagine a lot of people will be tempted by it, but I can also understand that some will prefer not to read it at this time.